What do we do when we can't go out? We watch good movies. And then if you're a geek, you also rank them. Hey folks, so this is something I've been thinking about doing for a while. I am going to rank all the films directed by the legendary Hayao Miyazaki. Now, it is only going to be the films directed by him. It's not going to be every film released by Studio Ghibli, because despite the fact that people think they're synonymous, there were other directors there at that studio. And in addition, I'm not doing any of the shorts. So that means that I have 11 films to rank, starting from 1979 with Castle Cagliostro, going all the way up to The Wind Rises. So let's start at the bottom, and we work our way up. And since I already mentioned it, let's start with the Castle of Cagliostro, which I think I mispronounced when I said it earlier. Anyways, I actually debated whether or not to even put this one on the list. I've noticed a lot of lists of Miyazaki's films either ignore this one or give it a very passing mention. Because the thing is, the entire property of Lupin III, which this is related to, was a pre-existing property, pre-existing manga. There were already animated films, so this is the least Miyazaki film ever made, and it's also the first film he ever directed. But at the same time, you can see a lot of the signatures that would very much come to be prominent in his later works. A lot of the pacing of some of the scenes, the way shots linger on things that aren't the main characters, the setting of some of the castles itself, some of the mechanisms going on. There's even like a weird funky flying device. So there's notes of his signature stuff. Then the music, while not being from his standard collaborator that he used for most of his movies, is still reminiscent of what you're used to hearing in a Miyazaki film. But at the same time, it still comes in at the bottom because these are not characters you would expect Miyazaki to be dealing with. He did try and mold them to his own sense of how a hero should be. From what I could tell, I don't know a ton about Lupin III, who is a bit of a international thief. He's way more lecherous and a bit of a skis normally, and he's a bit more heroic here. He's not totally shed the skis thing, but it's not nearly as prominent as I guess it was in other instances. So you can feel Miyazaki trying to mold it into his own thing, but he's still kind of restrained by what the property is. And so we'll move on from here. And also I should note that actually none of these films, and especially none of the 10 that most people would consider the proper Miyazaki films, none of these are bad. These are all good movies. Every single one of them is worth watching if you haven't. So honestly, this entire ranking is just a matter of taste. So let's move up to number 10. In the number 10 spot, we have Castle in the Sky. What is it about castles? It didn't bring out his best work. Castle in the Sky has some absolutely beautiful moments and visuals and vibe. But it's also got sort of the most nebulous story. It's just, we want to get to this floating castle. And we're here now. Okay? And his stories can be meandering, but this feels much more like a quest narrative, but it kind of lacks the forward thrust you'd want out of a quest narrative. It's also his only film, aside from Castle of Cagliostro, that has a definitive, clear-cut villain. Like, no qualms. This isn't like just an antagonist, like flat-out villain. And that's kind of weird in a Miyazaki film, to have somebody that clear-cut as the bad guy. This is a bad person. And that doesn't help either. It's still well put together, and there's definitely some visuals, especially sort of some of these ancient robots that you see. They're gorgeous, and the way they move is amazing, but that vibe is not pervasive enough across the film for it to get any higher than the 10th spot. Number 9 is going to be Porco Rosso. This is an odd one. It does play into one of Miyazaki's great loves, that of flying and flying contraptions, and the entire thing being based around basically dogfights and air pirates. So it is in his wheelhouse in some ways, but it's got an odd feel to it. I think between the somewhat more traditional masculine hero, which feels in many ways out of place in a Miyazaki film, and just sort of the meandering of events. But again, a little bit like Castle in the Sky, it feels like it should have a firmer narrative, because like you've got basically a flying ace who is a great pilot and a great dogfighter. It feels like he should have a clearer story as opposed to sort of doing the more meandering, we'll just wander from here to here and here's some of these characters and bring this in and hey, just sort of wrap it up in a sort of laissez-faire way, which normally works for Miyazaki, but it feels a little bit out of place with this kind of story. So number 8 is going to be Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. So this is what many people consider to be the first proper Miyazaki film, because this was the first one that was entirely his idea, his thing, as opposed to Castle of Cagliostro, which was his first feature film, but not really his characters, his franchise, his notions. So this is really steeped in what you expect out of a Miyazaki film. Strong female protagonist in your main lead character, amazing world, crazy creatures, weird flying contraptions, a strong environmental message. It's all here. And there's cute creatures, there's huge intimidating ones, but even those ones have kind of a serenity to them. And it's big and it's epic. And this has one of the larger stories that you would get from Miyazaki. As time would go on, he would kind of focus in on and even with stories set in big fantasy worlds, would narrow the focus in. Whereas this is a bit more of these are kingdoms clashing, these are world-shaping events we're looking at, which you don't often get from Miyazaki. And I don't think that necessarily inherently drags it down, but it is a little bit bloated. It runs a little bit longer than it probably needs to. And you do sort of, while you have all of his signatures in it, they're not quite refined yet. They're not quite polished. It's a little rough around the edges, and actually not even in and of itself, but just in terms of how cleanly he's able to do things down the road. Still a good movie, though. So at number 7, we have The Wind Rises, at present the last feature film created by Hayao Miyazaki. And I know a lot of people really sort of cheered for this to win an Oscar the year that it came out, but I think that was wanting to give him one more major award as he was going out, because while this is a visually gorgeous film, and the scope is very sweet and very intimate, because it is, I was almost going to say a real-life story. It's not really, but it's about an actual historical Japanese figure who invented a very influential airplane design. And it does a really good job of shifting, focusing on his life, his connections, his relationships, but also this work and the passion he has as he's pursuing, trying to refine this airplane. The thing is, some of the more standard Miyazaki flourishes, like some of the more exotic and whimsical flying machine designs, get crowbarred in through a dream sequence, and it really does feel like he couldn't bring himself to not have that. That was the only way he could think to bring it. It doesn't feel like something organic to the story. It feels like something that Miyazaki usually does, and it's kind of crowbarred in there. It doesn't derail the whole thing, but it didn't fit the vibe of the film up to that point, and largely it's that kind of brings it down. And yet, I say that, at the same time, it's not like if you'd removed the whimsical elements, it suddenly would have been a better film. Because it is way more grounded, I actually find it a little bit dull compared to some of his others. But as with all these, still worth seeing. Number 6, Ponyo. What a weird movie this is. And I mean that in the best way. Miyazaki's take on The Little Mermaid results in this little shape-shifting fish blob that turns into a girl who loves ham, and the world, or at least this town, gets flooded, but it's saved by this massive water goddess. And you've got Ponyo's father, who's kind of like a human, but he's like a wizard, but he like lives in the ocean and doesn't think very well of people at all. And you've got this bonding of Ponyo and this young boy. Like, oh, it's a weird movie. But it's got such a great vibe. And I think that's part of what makes it weird yet wonderful, because you are watching this town get threatened by like massive tsunami-sized waves, but there's still this loose fantasy like, oh, isn't this pleasant vibe, even as like the town gets flooded. It's very strange, but if you can let it wrap you up in the vibe that it's bringing you to, it's a unique experience, this film. Number 5, Kikis Delivery Service. This one's just nice. It's just a nice, pleasant story about a young witch finding her place in the world. And her place is delivering packages. It's just a nice, simple, sweet kid story. I mean, nearly everything that Miyazaki has ever made is certainly kid-friendly. I do feel that this one, more than any of the others, is specifically a kid's story. Just the level of simplicity of it, and the matter-of-fact nature of it, and the way that it's kind of like a growing up story, but it's so gentle. It's not, because if you have a growing up story aimed at an older audience, you're generally going to get something where someone has harsher life lessons than go on here. And it just is a soft, gentle hug of a film. It's just really sweet. Okay, number 4, and here's the placement where everyone's going to yell at me. Number 4 is Spirited Away. And I know, like Spirited Away is everyone else's number 1. Now, Spirited Away is a great film. Absolutely, no question. Nearly all of these are. For me, honestly, it's the lead character. I find her to be one of Miyazaki's less engaging protagonists. She's not totally unengaging. She still works, but she's unengaging in the way Alice from Alice in Wonderland is unengaging. The world that she is now inhabiting and is wandering through and is existing in is so bursting at the seams with imagination and magic and whimsy, and she's just a girl. And it's not even necessarily a fault of the character. That's just kind of the nature of the beast when you do a story like this. But for me, that does make her just less engaging, and I find myself always really wrapped up in everything that isn't her. She's functional. She doesn't derail the film in any way, but I don't find myself rooting for her as a character. I just want to spend more time in this world. And wow, is it an amazing world. But that's the reason it's not higher. And that's me saying like something that's not great about it, but that's because I have to justify why it's not number 1, because I feel like it's everyone else's number 1. But so much inventiveness in this movie, and it's all just shown so matter-of-factly, which is something that Miyazaki does that I love. Including in the next one. Number 3, Howls Moving Castle. I like that he really rides the line between magic being an everyday thing and also feeling special. Because when you get something like, say, Kikis Delivery Service, yes, some people are impressed by the fact that she's a witch. No one's surprised by the fact that she's a witch and she can do what she can do. So there isn't, I think that's one of the reasons Kiki is a little bit lower for me. It doesn't quite have the same sense of wonder at the magical elements. They're just kind of there, and they're normal for there. What I like about Howl's Moving Castle is this is a world in which magic is normal, but not everybody can do it, and those who can't do it are in a level of awe or fear of it. While it's normal to the world, it's not normal to everyone who lives in it. And I think that helps balance things and gives a higher degree of that sense of wonder to it that I really, really enjoy. And I like Sophie a lot as a character, and I find Howl kind of fascinating for the sort of coward hero, in quotes, that he is. And Calcifer's great. Here's a curse for you. May all your bacon burn. And I enjoy the dynamic of the household in Howl's Moving Castle when Sophie comes in and just basically takes the place over. This young girl cursed into the body of an old woman. It goes some odd places towards in its third act, and the wrap up is a little hastily thrown together and overly neat. But I those are the reasons why it's not higher. But this is a dang good one. Now, number 2 is my nostalgic favorite, because my number 2 pick was the first Miyazaki film I ever saw. And I even got to see it in the theater. And that one is Princess Mononoke. I like the scale and the scope of this. This is about as close as I think Miyazaki has ever come to making a properly adult film. Because there is that sense of wonder and whimsy, but also of this world is dangerous and it is being damaged and fighting back violently. So having all that brought together in a stunning film, in what is personally my favorite soundtrack that any of the Miyazaki movies have. And this amazing, the spirit of the forest is one of the most gorgeous things when it's in its translucent form and sort of moving against the skyline. It is stunning to me, and I love the complexity of the villains in this. And of course, it's got giant wolves. And I love wolves. I can't wait to show this movie to my kid. She's not quite old enough to watch it yet, I don't think, but soon. She'll be there soon. I can't wait for her to see this. And I would totally understand if for other people this isn't as high, but like I said, this is the first Miyazaki film I ever saw. It has to be right up there, but it doesn't take my number 1 spot. My number 1 Miyazaki film, for me, is My Neighbor Totoro. To me, that film is the perfect distillation of everything Miyazaki does well. It is sweet and just a little bit adventurous. It is whimsical and magical and yet also grounded. And these girls feel so real to me. And even more so now that I'm a parent. I saw it for the first time before I had a kid, and I still thought, wow, those really feel like real kids. And even more so now. That's astounding to me. And it strikes that balance just right, because you have the girls who they're experiencing these wonderful, amazing things, and they get to bring that awe to it, because this is amazing and magical to them. Yet they're also young enough to just accept that it is the case. They'll look at something like the cat bus, slack-jawed, but they'll also roll with it. And it's really wonderful. It is the most finely balanced mix of familial relations, connection to the earth and the place where you live, how we connect to each other, the importance of relationships, the importance of family, and the wonder of the world, large scale and small. This is a gorgeous film. I think it is the perfect example of everything that Miyazaki is so good at. And I personally think it's his best film. What do you think? How would you rank Miyazaki's films? However you would do it, drop something on down in the comments. Let's talk about it. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Hey, thanks so much for watching. There's all the usual options that you can do, like, subscribe, hit the bell, share this video, all of which help me out and help the channel grow. If you are the generous type who want to help more directly, I also have a Patreon. There'll be a link at the end of this video and also down in the description. You can get your name in the credits as you are currently seeing for all these people who help make this channel what it is today. But you also don't have to do any of that because at the end of the day, you're the council. I'm just running the meetings. Stay safe out there.